Lead contamination scare grows as government pledges special task force. Anger at home and abroad over law allowing Japan troops to fight overseas. And anger in Greece over austerity despite getting more money. Good evening. Fears about lead-contaminated water have now spread to St. Paul's Hospital as well as some private housing estates. It comes after the plumber responsible for the pipework at several public housing estates where excessive levels of lead were found revealed his company also handled such projects. As Diane To reports, he admitted it's likely the same materials were used.
Tests have shown the welding filler used in connecting water pipes at Kai Ching Estate in the Kai Tak development area was half lead. A key concern surrounds who made the call to purchase and use this material. Speaking on radio this morning, the plumber of the pipework at Kai Ching Estate, Lam Tak Sam, insisted he was just an employee of Ho Biu Ki Construction Engineering Company and that the tools and materials were provided by his firm. My role is to oversee all the certification documents issued by the Water Supplies Department and surveyors, he said. My job is to inform workers at the construction sites that the housing department has to check everything before anything can be installed. He insisted he did not manage purchasing. On whether the final materials used for each job is the same as what the purchasing department ordered, Lam said that's overseen by other co-workers. The plumber complained it's unfair that the government singled him out before any investigation had been carried out and hoped his employer would speak up about the incident. Lam revealed his company has also been contracted to do piping works for St. Paul's Hospital in Causeway Bay and other private housing developments. He said the materials used would probably have been much the same as those used at Kai Ching Estate. St. Paul's Hospital has confirmed it hired Ho Biu Ki to install the pipework in its new Block B. The hospital said the building is not yet in use, so no patients are affected. It took samples of the pipes and the welding material for testing earlier today. Its contractor has agreed to hook up the water supply earlier than scheduled, so all parts of the water supply chain could be tested properly. The hospital added that the pipework of Block A was not installed by Ho Biu Ki. Ho Biu Ki Construction Engineering has refused to respond to our inquiries so far. Diane To, TVB News.
Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Jones said today the main contractors involved in the water contamination scandal have promised to shoulder their responsibilities, and the Housing Authority has pledged to review and improve the quality control of its construction materials. Li Ziyun has that story.
The Housing Authority reviewed today for the first time the results of tests on the welding filler metal taken from water pipes at 2 vacant units at Kai Ching Estate. Both samples contained about 50% lead. Director of Housing Stanley Ying couldn't say if the filler material was provided by the contractor, China State Construction. But as the contract states that materials must not contain lead, Ying said the company, as the main contractor, must still bear the responsibility for this. The Housing Authority will also hold Shui On Building Contractors Limited liable according to its contract for the building works at Kwai Lun Estate, where lead-tainted tap water was also found. The authorities said the two contractors have agreed to take up remedy work and will, for the time being, help provide safe drinking water to affected residents. Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Jones promised to conduct a comprehensive review of the Housing Authority soon.
Review committee that is going to be set up under the Housing Authority is to do a thorough, comprehensive body check of our existing system and mechanisms for quality assurance of materials and parts used in public housing projects, including prefabricated components.
Lawmaker and Housing Authority member Alan Leung hopes the review will save the authority's reputation.
The building ordinance does not apply to projects undertaken by the Housing Authority. Now, if the Housing Authority can no longer convince the law enforcement agencies that it can competently and ably look after the whole construction process, then this exemption will at once become questionable.
At a 3-hour meeting today, members of the Housing Authority also expressed concern over the trouble and anguish residents of the affected estates are suffering. They discussed in a meeting suggestions of offering these residents compensation in terms of rent reduction or rebate on water bills, although there's no conclusion on that yet. Liu Xian, TVB News.
Overseas, a panel of Japan's lower house today approved legislation that could see the country's troops fight abroad for the first time since World War II. The highly contentious bills, which would drop a ban on fighting to defend a friendly country, have sparked huge demonstrations in Tokyo. Alan Bookney reports.
An estimated 100,000 protesters gathered outside the Parliament building last night ahead of today's vote. Opponents say the bills violate Japan's pacifist constitution and could drag the country into U.S.-led conflicts around the globe. Polls show 80% of those surveyed are against the legislation. The unpopular bills were crafted after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet adopted a new security policy last year. It reinterpreted part of Japan's post-World War II constitution that permitted the military's use of force only in self-defense. The legislation in question would also allow Japan to defend its allies against aggression, a concept called collective self-defense. Abe called the bills absolutely necessary, saying the security situation surrounding Japan is becoming increasingly challenging. In Beijing, the foreign ministry called into question Japan's post-war commitment to peaceful development and urged Tokyo to learn the lessons of history. Sino-Japanese ties have long been frayed by China's memories of Japanese wartime aggression. Meanwhile, the South Korean Foreign Ministry urged Japan to discuss its new security policy transparently to maintain peace and stability in the region. Dozens of South Koreans demonstrated outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul to voice their opposition. And protesters were out in force in Tokyo again today. The legislation will now go to Japan's upper house. If no vote is taken after 60 days, it will be returned to the full lower house, where Abe's coalition can enact it with a 2/3 majority. Alan Bookney at TVB News.
Eurozone finance ministers have agreed to give Greece a €7 billion loan to keep its finances afloat. It's expected to be approved by all EU member states tomorrow. In another development, the European Central Bank has raised emergency funding for Greek banks.
We substantially accommodated the request put forward by the Bank of Greece, recalibrated over 1 week. So the increase would be 900 million over 1 week.
The new relief for Greece comes after its parliament approved new austerity measures overnight in return for a bailout. But as James Aiken reports, many Greeks are unhappy with the harsh terms.
After hours of debate and a late-night session, Greece's parliament voted 229 to 64 to implement more sweeping reform measures in a deal that no one seems to like. The package of measures had to be approved to open talks on a new €85 billion bailout. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said it came down to a choice between accepting the harsh terms offered by lenders or default. Tsipras required the support of pro-European opposition parties to push the measure through. But the vote triggered a revolt in his own party, with dozens of lawmakers accusing Tsipras of blackmail. Greece's former finance minister, who headed the bailout strategy until he was replaced 10 days ago, also voted against the package, though he denied it afterwards.
I didn't vote against the government.
You did not vote against it?
Nope. But I'm not going to give you an interview now either.
On the streets of central Athens, thousands marched in protest. By evening, police were responding with tear gas as anti-establishment demonstrators lobbed petrol bombs in front of the parliament in some of the most serious violence in more than 2 years. Strikes are now gripping the country as workers show their anger over the austerity measures. James Aiken, TVB News.
Back locally, the government today announced it will sell as much as $10 billion of inflation-linked bonds, or I-bonds, starting on Tuesday. The bond will have a 3-year maturity. Hong Kong residents can apply for the 5th I-bond issuance from July 21st to the 29th. The minimum subscription amount is $10,000. It will be issued on August 7th and listed on the stock exchange on August 10th. Former government official Joao Da Silva was handed a 2-week suspended jail sentence today after being found guilty of accepting payment for services he couldn't provide. Wina Wong has the story.
Retired Assistant Labour Commissioner Joao Da Silva arrived at the Kowloon City Magistrates Court this morning. Earlier this month, the former government official was found guilty on 2 counts of wrongly accepting payment for a product. Chao's Le Beaumont Language Center had taken a total of $8,900 from 2 students just 2 weeks before the schools in Tsim Sha Tsui and Causeway Bay shut down. In court today, his lawyer mitigated that Chao was suffering from sciatica, is old in age, and had no criminal background. In sentencing, Deputy Magistrate Lam Tse Kan said his community service order report did not recommend the 70-year-old to do physically demanding work. Considering his age and the fact he had already returned the school fees, Lam gave Chao 14 days in jail, suspended for a year. Chao has not decided whether he will appeal.
This case actually has wasted too much of my time. Whether I will appeal or not would depend on the legal advice I'm going to seek.
Chao's conviction is the first of its kind since the amended Trade Descriptions Ordinance came into effect in 2013. After the sentencing, he complained that the new law blurs the line between civil and criminal offenses and does not protect businesses. Chao described the event as a storm in a teacup. He maintains that he had never meant to commit a crime. During the proceedings, the court heard that when accepting the school fees, Chao had believed a potential investor would inject money into Le Beaumont. But the potential deal went nowhere. Wina Wong, TVB News.
More court news. An Occupy protester was sentenced to 10 months in prison for assaulting a police officer late last year. Rani Samtani reports.
On December 1st last year, 3 off-duty police officers were attacked by an Occupy demonstrator near Admiralty Centre. The officers said objects were thrown at them and protesters pushed them to the ground. One of the policemen recognized the defendant, Ng Ting Pong, as his attacker. The court heard that Ng insulted the policeman and hit an officer in the chest. During the trial at Kowloon City Magistracy, Ng escaped from the court building on June 3rd after claiming that he needed to go to the toilet. The court issued an arrest warrant and Ng was apprehended on June 10th. In mitigation, Ng's lawyer asked the court to consider the complex social conditions and rocky relations between the police and citizens at the time. But the magistrate pointed out that Ng has shown no remorse for his actions and that he has a previous criminal record. The magistrate found him guilty of 1 count of assaulting a police officer and 2 counts of common assault. Another defendant, So Win Kin, was accused of hitting a police officer during the incident but was found not guilty. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
LegCo's president said today he is pessimistic about the city's political future as he summed up the legislative year. Zhang Yoxing